Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing into the anatomy of a localized curse from that incredibly fascinating piece of lore known as The Descent from Dargan. What makes this material so absolutely gripping isn't just the jump scares. It's watching the sheer mechanical precision of how a threat builds. It's like watching a deadly puzzle piece itself together, escalating from a tiny, localized whisper into a full-blown, all-consuming nightmare.
So, to really get how this text works, we gotta start right at its core. Ask yourself, what is the one rule of Dargan? Well, it's terrifyingly simple. If you hear knocking under your bed after midnight, never, ever look down. That is it. One single rule for survival. And honestly, it's brilliant, right? Because it preys entirely on our most basic, hardwired human instinct, curiosity. And here's the number that gives this whole piece of lore its absolute gravity: 50. For 50 solid years, the entire village successfully followed this rule. Nobody broke it. That is half a century of absolute, unyielding discipline. So structurally, this number does some incredibly heavy lifting in the narrative. It builds up this insane amount of tension right before our subject, a 17-year-old named Saad, moves into the village with his family. The pressure is on, big time.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, The Midnight Breach. The story wastes no time. It immediately grounds the abstract horror in a hyper-specific reality. We're talking exactly 2:41 a.m. Saad is just lying in bed, and he hears 3 slow knocks beneath him. Knock, knock, knock. Pinpointing that exact timestamp, it just makes the whole situation feel uncomfortably real, and honestly, highly methodical.
Now put yourself in his shoes for a second. What would you do if you were 17, trying to sleep in this creaky new house? Well, instead of following horror movie survival rule number 1, literally just ignoring it, he assumes it's a prank, he grabs his phone flashlight, and he bends down to look. Out of everyone in Dargan, Saad just has the absolute worst luck. He breaks a pristine 50-year survival streak on his very first night.
But he doesn't see a prankster under his bed. He just freezes. The text describes this incredibly chilling visual. There is no floor. It's just an endless, dark tunnel stretching way, way down. And waiting at the very bottom of that pitch-black drop, a man with no eyes, wearing an impossibly wide smile, staring directly back up at him.
So Saad predictably screams and jumps back, but right then, from the tunnel, the entity delivers this haunting dialogue, and it's whispered unmistakably in the voice of Saad's own father. "You looked, now it knows your face." Yeah, let that dread just sink in for a second. The absolutely crucial point here is that looking wasn't just a simple mistake, it was a targeted invitation. The 50-year seal is officially broken, and the curse is on.
Which brings us to Section 2, Symptoms of the Ascent.
We can actually trace the supernatural events that follow as forensic symptoms of this entity aggressively pushing its way into reality. And if you look at the timeline, it is a shockingly rapid escalation over just a single day. At 2:41 a.m., we've got the initial look, right? First contact. By the very next morning, we get the mirror delay. And by night 2, the haunting fully breaches the physical environment of the house. This entity is literally not wasting a single second.
Let's break down that morning symptom, actually, because it is an absolute masterclass in psychological horror. Saad looks into the mirrors around his house, but his reflection, actually, scratch that. It isn't his reflection at all. The mirror shows him moving a few seconds late. The implications here are just terrifying. The mirrors aren't reflecting Saad. They're showing an entity that is mimicking him on a slight delay. It's studying him, it's learning his exact physical form.
And then we hit night 2. The symptoms get super aggressive. The knocking returns, but it's significantly louder. Saad's mom suddenly starts speaking in her sleep, except she's using this deep, guttural male voice. Over the sound of something physically scratching inside the actual walls of the house, she just says, "We are climbing."
And this brilliantly illustrates the entity's whole attack pattern. If we look at it clinically, it's basically a standard, terrifying operating procedure. Step 1. Force eye contact to establish the target. Step 2. Utilize mimicry. Hijacking reflections and family voices just to bridge the gap. Step 3. The climb. The entity is literally ascending from that endless tunnel straight into our world. Which brings us to the actual physical manifestation of that climb. Saad locks himself in his room, totally panicking, and he checks under the bed again. What he sees is beyond horrifying.
The breach has widened. Dozens of pale hands are crawling up from the tunnel, gripping his bed frame like a cluster of spiders. But pay really close attention to this last detail. One of those pale hands? It is holding a fresh photograph of Saad sleeping. This is deeply, deeply unsettling proof that the entity wasn't just climbing, it had already been right there in the room, standing over him just moments earlier.
This pushes us right to the edge. Section 3, the final knock.
Realizing that a locked door is pretty much entirely useless against something coming from under the floorboards, Saad bolts out into the village streets. But he doesn't find help. He finds this eerie, impossible stillness. Every single house in Dargan is completely empty. Every door is wide open. Saad hasn't escaped the nightmare. He's just walked out into a much, much larger one. The entire village has been assimilated. They're all just standing silently out in the streets, every single one of them facing Saad's house, and their mouths are unnaturally stretched wide open. This paints such a horrific visual, but it also demonstrates the sheer, terrifying scale of the entity's power. By breaking that one rule, Saad didn't just doom himself. The entity has completely infected the entire environment and absolutely everyone in it.
Out of those stretched mouths, the villagers finally speak. They deliver this collective, simultaneous whisper. Don't let it finish climbing. It is the inescapable climax of the curse. See, they aren't warning him to run away. They're announcing that the process is already complete.
Because right after they whisper that, we get the stark, brutal twist of the whole narrative. Behind Saad, there is one final knock. But it doesn't come from under a bed. It doesn't come from a wall. It comes directly from inside his own chest. The entity hasn't just climbed into his house or his village. It has successfully climbed inside of him.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. For 50 years, that rule held this thing down in the dark tunnel. It starved it of a face, it starved it of a host. Now that the 50-year rule has been permanently broken and the entity has successfully assimilated a physical vessel, where does it climb next? I mean, Dargan was just the beginning. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and honestly, whatever you do tonight, don't look under the bed.